Hello everyone and welcome back. I want to talk about one of the most important aspects of photography today in my Notes on Photography series, and that is whether or not to use a soft release. Just kidding. I want to talk about, yes, images like I normally do in this series, one image in particular, but the gist, and by the way, to let you know how serious I am about this, I made some notes on my trusty iPad Pro. I want to talk about soft images, or out of focus images, or not tack sharp images. Now, in the industry, in my coming up in the industry, out of focus was not a term that was used very often. Sorry, just use some mouthwash. Out of focus was not used very often. Soft or not tack sharp were the expressions that were used most commonly. I think it was for a couple of reasons. Out of focus was too long and rambling, and when an editor was in your face yelling at you from a close proximity, it was just easier to say soft or not tack sharp. Out of focus seemed, I don't know, maybe too complicated. It came better that soft was just this not soft attack on you as an individual. It happened all the time, but there are varying degrees of soft. And some soft images work and others do not. Let me give you an example of what doesn't work. At one point in time in my career, I ended up at a pro baseball game. And over the years, I shot pro baseball, pro basketball, pro football, pro golf, pro tennis. I was not a good sports photographer. I shot spring training, I shot Senior Olympics, I shot the US National Swim Trials, I shot the Super Bowl. You end up in assignments in one way or another. It could be why you could get these assignments based on where you were geographically, based on the fact that there may not be any other photographers around, and suddenly you became a sports photographer. I was not good at sports. I really enjoy sports. I like playing them. Occasionally I will watch them on TV, but for the most part, I don't like to photograph them. So I end up at a baseball game, and remember, at the highest levels of professional sport photography, you have specialists. You have people who shoot nothing but pro football, pro baseball, pro basketball, pro golf, skiing, tennis, adventure sports, etc. That's all they do. And so I happened to be at this baseball game, and I was right next to two full-time professional, high-level baseball photographers, and the fourth person involved was a friend of mine who was kind of a jack-of-all-trades news photographer that could shoot basically anything. They were all much better at me, and two of them were what I would call expert-level professional full-time baseball shooters. When you're photographing a baseball game, the action at home plate is often considered taboo because it's too common. The same thing can be said for action at second base. So if there's a turn of a double play and you've got the second baseman in the air, he's tagged to the second base and he's up in the air throwing, that can also be like too easy for a lot of photo editors. And so they're looking for something else. And so if there's a play at second or a play at home base, it has to be biblical for anyone to pay attention. So the four of us are there. Baseball games go on for like 96 hours. You're basically like you're filled with hot dogs and you're sitting in 100-degree weather, and there's a play at home plate. Somebody from the outfield, like Ichiro, or somebody has this laser beam arm that throws from the outfield to home plate, and there's a play at home. And I happen to be the only one with my camera in my hand. And instead of focusing like I should, I think I spun the lens barrel in the wrong direction. So I not only blew focus, I blew it by a mile. Now, this was in the film era, and none of these people knew. They just heard the camera go off, and all their cameras were on the ground because they were sitting there yapping when they should have been shooting. So the play happens, they hear my motor drive and assume that I've nailed this focus, and I am a mile off. So I play it up like, nailed it, easy, this baseball stuff, I could do this all day long. Now, I got back to the paper and the whole story blew up in my face because they realized when they saw my film how badly I'd blown the focus. If that photo had been off by a teeny bit, a micro movement of that lens barrel, it still would not have worked. You do not see sports photographs, for the most part, sports photographs like that, peak action that is out of focus or soft or not tack sharp. When those editors are looping those transparencies, they are looking for tack sharp. When they see soft stuff, those slides are getting spit off the edge of the light table. Bear with me, this was back in the film days. Same thing happens now in Lightroom where people are going through and looking. They're looking for tack sharp stuff. But when you're a documentary photographer, and you're shooting those same environments, there's a different set of rules. And not every single picture has to be tack sharp, because what will compensate for sharpness at times is mood. Mood to me trumps sharpness depending on how far out of focus it is and how many elements in the photograph are still sharp enough to carry the photograph. And I'm going to show you a picture in a minute that's from a story I did in California a few years ago, but I want to give you a little backstory on this. The backstory is, and because I'm telling you this because so many people have asked me how I come up with story ideas. So I don't remember the initial spark that aimed me towards this story. But what I discovered was, and what I'm trying to remember is how I discovered this existed, and I don't honestly remember because it's been too long ago. But I discovered that in the 1890s, some Azorean dairy farmers from the Azore Islands moved to Central California, and they brought with them the Portuguese culture. They brought the language, they brought the food, they brought the community, and in addition, they brought their version of bullfighting, which is called Portuguese bloodless bullfighting. So you're basically at a bullfight, but the bull is not being killed. The bull on its haunches right here has a section, believe it or not, of Velcro that's attached to the bull. And they have picadors and they have a lot of the same traditions that happen at regular bullfights, but instead of stabbing and killing the bull, they do these things where it's Velcroed onto the top. There's also a lot of other additional traditions. They have these guys called forcados. At the end of the fight, these men get in a line and they tackle the bull. The bull actually, they get to the bull to the one side of the arena. These men jump in and they stand in a line, single file. And the guy in the front, believe it or not, the first time I saw this, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The guy in the front of the line gets the bull's attention and the bull attacks, charges, and the guy stands his ground. And when the bull's head drills him in the chest, he wraps his arms around the horns and all the guys in line behind him pile on and they literally stop the bull in his tracks, and then they pull off the Velcroed, what would be in a traditional bullfight would be the actual sword. They pull those off. So I'm there. I hear about bloodless bullfighting. I start to do the research, which meant looking at the maps, looking at the small towns, calling the Cattlemen's Association, calling the bloodless bullfighting groups, and it was very tricky. It was hard to get information. I ended up driving up there on my own the first time and just basically showing up at a little town and walking in with my cameras. And the community was incredibly nice. They were like, "Who are you?" And I told them, "What do you want to do?" Great. And they just opened the doors for me. And in the bull arena, there is just on the outside of the fence of the bull arena, there's a little place called the Callejon, which is an area that's probably 3 or 4 feet deep. And it's the safe zone basically. So you have the wooden fence in front of you that forms the perimeter of the bull ring. Then you have the Callejon, and then there's a secondary fence behind you. So if you see a matador turn and run, they will often jump over the fence into the Callejon. It's sort of a safe zone. They let me walk the Callejon. I went with 2 Leicas, a 35 and a 50. Which was my standard rig. Now you might think that's a bit nuts for shooting a sporting event, but it's not once you get used to doing that. Now I did go back the 3rd or 4th trip. I think I made 5 trips total. 5 if you count the trip to LA. Yes, there is bullfighting in the middle of Los Angeles, believe it or not. I went there 3 or 4 trips, and on the 4th trip, I took a long lens, and I got incredibly lucky. I got 2 motor drive sequences of guys getting absolutely lit up by the bull and flipped up in the air. You know, it's long lens, peak action sport stuff, so I'm not that excited about it. But the picture I want to show you is one that sort of talks about soft image and why a soft image can actually work. So let me break this down, and then I will come back and I'll say goodbye, because I don't like goodbyes. They're painful for me. But I think this picture works, and I'll tell you why. All right, everyone, let's have a little look at this soft image. Even though it is soft, I do think it works, and I'm going to tell you why. But the first thing I want to bring your attention to is this white light up here, these 2 white lines right here, and then also the crowd. And I guess you could throw in these little squigglies over here to the right. This gives you an idea of how long this exposure is. For me, as a rule, shooting with a Leica with TMZ or Tri-X or whatever, if I had my lens wide open, I could typically, because the cameras are small, they're easy to hold, I could typically handhold 1/8 of a second without really having much of a problem. Underneath 1/8 of a second, a quarter or half second is where you got into the 50-50 range of there's a 50% chance I'm going to get something usable and a 50% chance I'm not. This is, my guess, is either a quarter of a second or a half second exposure, wide open with TMZ and a Leica M4, M6. So I got a little bit lucky here. But let me tell you why I still think this works. Number one, here's your primary matador here, right? This is El Jefe. He's just won his fight. You've got sort of an apprentice guy here. I forget the name of these guys. They play sort of a secondary role in the bullfight. And then you've got sort of a younger junior matador here who does participate in the fight, but he is not on the same par as this guy on the left. What I like is I have 3 players here, and I have a nice gap right here. So if I was laying this out as a spread in a book or a magazine, I've got a perfect little break between these 3 guys. This would be the left-hand page, this would be the right-hand page. So it works in spread. As you can see here with this guy, his face is not tack sharp, his face is not tack sharp, and his face is not tack sharp. But you can see enough of recognizable detail in their face to still get an idea of what they look like. The next thing I love is look at the bow that this guy is putting out. This is a strut that happens only in like sport bike motorcycle riders, matadors, and very, very few other people will strut like that. And plus, look at these outfits, these uniforms. These are pretty magical. If you haven't seen a matador's outfit up close, it's kind of astounding. So I think the moment that I've captured with him in this strut definitely works. I think you have here a very slight, you'll see this in the background, there is a slight tilt to this. I don't think that was intentional. I think that was me just getting what I thought I could get. And again, I am panning slightly, very, very slowly. I am panning with these people as they are moving to camera left and their right. So it's a pretty low percentage. This tilt doesn't bother me. I actually think I kind of like it. And last, maybe second to last, is how the light is falling on pieces of the cape here, which I think is really beautiful. And I think the same thing applies here to this piece of cape. These capes are just catching light in what would be, as if you look down here, is a pretty dark black hole of nothingness. And the last thing I like about this too are these lights. I really like how I'm getting this sort of splinter effect on the light. That's kind of luck. And then also how this piece of light over here anchors that side of the frame. So all in all, I think this is a workable, usable image, even though it's not tack sharp. I think this is an example of a decent, soft image that's still very usable. And I think what overrides the focus here is mood. I think you get a very clear sense of what's happening, the adulation, the drama, the sound. You can almost kind of smell and hear what this would have been like. And I think it's a successful picture. I'm not saying it's the greatest. You might totally disagree, but that is why I think a soft image from time to time can actually work. So that was my breakdown. I think this picture works. I'm glad I made it. I think overall, total, I made, like I said, 5 trips to work on this project. And I think I probably walked away with somewhere between 25 and 30 photographs total that I would pull from to form a photo essay. If I had to, I could edit that down to 10 pretty easily. And if I really had to, I could probably edit it down to about 6 that encapsulated the whole story. I have no reason to do that anymore. I've put this work into a variety of publications over the years. It's been used many times. I've had a lot of people reach out to buy prints. I don't really sell prints much anymore, but it was fun. It was one of those stories that was self-generated, and I had a blast doing it. It was the exact kind of work that I love doing. We've all seen pictures of bullfighting, but because this was that Portuguese twist, and it was in a location that I could easily access with a fairly long drive. I loved the sense of small town community. I loved the sense of culture, foreign culture, and it felt like a good personal project. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I will be back with more.